He smelled her the moment she walked in. A tantalizing mix of peaches and cream and woman that made his beast pace in his mind and whisper, "Ours." Clint looked up to see the face of the one he'd waited for, my mate, and sucked in a breath, for she wasn't what he'd expected at all. For one, she was tiny. He doubted she'd even reach his chin. Yet, while short in stature, she had the curves, pillowy and sweet, of a woman. Their eyes met, and even across the space separating them, he noticed her interest, the way her lips softened and parted, an innocent look that made him rock hard. "Oh, baby, I can't wait to see your face when it's looking up at me, glazed with passion." She broke the glance, and Clint realized something else before her gaze turned fearful, and she whirled to escape. He wasn't the only man who'd noticed her. But forget that dilemma for the moment. She'd left, and if he didn't hurry, he'd have to resort to sniffing out her trail like some trained canine. Clint strode across the warehouse, snarling when a few of his pack brothers moved to follow. They backed off, unwilling to challenge their alpha. Clint reached the rapidly shutting door with Brandon, best friend and pack beta, on his heels. "She's mine," he growled at his lieutenant, who ignored his order. "Not if I get to her first," replied Brandon, hip-checking him aside to dive through the door. "If we weren't best friends—" Clint gritted his teeth and followed, emerging into bright sunlight. The woman he intended to bed, and yes, wed, had already scurried half a block away. Whereas Brandon jogged to catch up to her, Clint simply stuck 2 fingers in his mouth and whistled. The strident sound startled her, and she whirled to gape back at him with big, doe-like eyes. "You wouldn't happen to be my 2 p.m. interview, would you?" he said on a hunch, his question loud enough for her to hear as he strolled toward her. He tried to look harmless. What a joke. She was probably right to run. "I am the big bad wolf the stories warned you about." She stood her ground, however, even as her fearful bearing screamed weak. But that was okay because he had strength enough for both of them. Brandon, with his long stride in closer position, reached her first, and Clint bit back a grin as she cringed from him and clutched her purse tightly to her chest. "I'm Brandon Schuster," said his business partner, sticking his hand out. She hesitated, biting her lower lip before placing her trembling hand in Brandon's. The shock of their skin-to-skin contact was all too visible, and Clint held back an urge to rip her away from his beta. His beast snarled in his mind, willing to forego friendship so it might take a bite out of the one who dared touch their woman. Ignoring the bloodthirsty requests of his beast, Clint instead smiled widely at the petite woman, perhaps a tad toothily, judging by the wide eyes that rose to meet his. "Hi there, I'm Clint Jefferson, majority owner of J&S Inc." He added that last bit on purpose, and enjoyed the way Brandon's mouth tightened. Clint stuck his hand out, and with the same lip-biting trepidation, she placed her hand in his. An electric current shot through him, and his beast grunted in recognition. "Ours." Expected, and yet odd, because there was no doubting the same thing had happened with Brandon, who now frowned at him. His tiny woman snatched her hand back and took a step away from them, her gaze darting between them. But he was glad to notice her initial trepidation seemed to have faded, and if he wasn't mistaken, he could smell distinct interest from her lower parts anyway. "I'm Josephine Winters, and I'm sorry to have wasted your time." Her voice, no surprise, was soft and demure, kind of like her. It's always the quiet ones, though, that end up wildest in bed. Clint forced himself to focus on her words, instead of how she'd looked naked and bent over. "Delicious." "Why do you say that? Your resume is quite impressive. Not only are you familiar with the computer system we're on, you've spent several years in management. It's exactly what we're looking for."